We'd like to call this evening's meeting of the Peoria City Council to order. We'd like to welcome H. Wayne Wilson and his listening audience at WCBU as well as Cable Channel 22. Madam Clerk, the council microphones are open for roll call. Here.
Member Ali. Here. Councilmember Sear.
Here.
Councilmember Grayeb.
Here.
Councilmember Jensen. Here. Councilmember Kelly. Here. Councilmember Montalongo.
Here.
Councilmember Moore.
Here.
Councilmember Euler.
Here.
Councilmember Riggenbach.
Here.
And Councilmember Ruckriegel. You have a quorum present, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We'd like to invite everyone to join us and stand for a moment of silent prayer or silent reflection, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. Councilmember Ruckriegel.
Mayor, I move to approve the minutes of the joint city council and town board meetings held August 13th, 2019, and the special city council meeting held August 24th, 2019, as printed.
That's seconded by Councilmember Kelly. Are there any corrections or changes to the minutes? Seeing none, please cast your ballots. Dr. Ali. The motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk.
Yes, our first item of business is a township item. 19-220 is the annual town financial report, April 1, 2018 to March 31, 2019 for the town of the city of Peoria, with a recommendation to receive and file.
Thank you. Trustee Grayeb.
Mr. Chairman, I would move to receive and file unless there are any thoughts or reflections on it.
We have a motion to receive and file, seconded by Trustee Kelly. Any questions from the council? I have just a couple. If not, Mr. Abnauer, welcome. First of all, maybe just a little public information on the delay, the reasons for the delay in getting the report this year.
Reason for the there was some issues, some wording that had been changed. There was a little confusion in that. We seemed to worked it out.
Okay, thank you.
We have worked it out.
Good deal.
Sure, there's other questions here, but it was just delayed due to some wording in the audit.
Well, some of my questions are on the notes that were contained in the report, and then a couple of them are just really informational for me. So, the total town expenditure. What was the total town expenditure?
I have the auditor here, and if it's okay with the trustees, if he could.
Absolutely. Red. Okay. So the breakdown was roughly $1,082,000 in general welfare and almost $189,000 in public welfare, correct?
The general government was a little over $1 million, public welfare was $985,000.
Right. So And I'm sorry, I didn't catch your name, Mr. Auditor.
Sorry, Ryan Hallwall, I'm sorry.
Ryan? Okay. So the total town budget surplus last year,
Yes, so the surplus, sorry, the total surplus would be that bottom number, on that same page for the 2.9 million. And that would be an accumulated surplus over the years, though, not for just the actual, for the current year you had excess receipts over disbursements of 653,000.
okay, that's what I was looking over on page 11.
Yep, those
Yep,
are the, that's
653 for the year. Okay.
correct.
I just want to make sure that we're on the same page on this.
Correct.
And then the larger number from page 4 was,
Yep, the 2.9 million would just be that surplus that's happened each year, built up over time.
okay.
And now some of it, as you can see there, is restricted for certain things such as IMRF, public welfare, things like that. And then you got your unassigned, which is basically the unrestricted money.
So 650, say 654 for the year, 3 million, of which some of it is restricted, representing a year and a half or so. I'm just curious how that reserve would compare. Is there a best practices, or is there a specific amount of money that is typically recommended for the township to have in reserve in these situations?
I think the GFOA put out a best practice a few years ago, it might be 5 or 6 years ago, and they recommended 3 to 6 months of operating expense at the minimum. And that's for general purpose governments. That's not specific for townships, but that was their recommendation.
Okay, so roughly how many months of operating expenses does that work out to?
I'd have to do the math on the looks like you have about 2 million for the year. Yeah, I think you think it was about 8 months.
Okay. So we're in really good shape and probably have a lot more in surplus. Okay.
Can I make one comment, though? We have reduced it last year, and we do intend to reduce it again this year. It had accumulated quite a bit before I had taken office, so I'm a little hesitant on reducing it all at once. But we have reduced it about $500,000 last year, and we will look at it again and have a reduction this year.
Thank you. On page 9, there were several notes within the report this year, but on page 9, and it wasn't a huge amount, but I was curious why we're showing no payment to the city for rent on the offices.
You might want to.
Why there's no rent? They pay it twice a year. We just had I don't know, the arrangement with the city was way before I got there.
And the note just said there was no rental payments for the year.
Yeah. Sorry. What you got to remember too is these are cash basis statements, not accrual basis. So a lot of it's just timing of when the township gets the bill. So maybe one year they get 2 bills, multiple bills in the same fiscal year. One year they get none. A lot of it just has to do with when the bill comes in.
Okay.
That's when they would pay it. So if this was an accrual-based statement, they would accrue that and show an expense. But with it being cash basis, it's all timing.
So, Mr. Manager, that's just something that's somewhere in between the finance department and the township?
Correct.
Okay. I see Councilman Sear, you have a question. I have a couple more to go here, but go ahead and jump in.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just had a question. I couldn't find anybody to explain to me what is GASB means in this liability. I see there's a column under liability, $145,000. Can you explain to me, Ryan, I didn't get your last name, but could you explain to me, this page 17, basically, I just don't understand all these unfunded accrued numbers.
Yeah, so the net OPEB liability of $145,000 on page 17. So GASB 75 is a new statement that was implemented. It was put out by the Government Accounting Standards Board. And what that number is that's the projected future OPEB liability. So it's an actuarial calculation where the actuaries go in, they project all the future benefit payments you're going to make for OPEB, for retirees' health insurance. And then they present value it back to today and say this is what that present value is of all these future payments. And that is what they say would be the actuarial liability. So if you were an accrual basis financial statement, that would be a liability that would be shown on these statements. But because it's cash basis, there's no liability booked on the statements.
So there's no liabilities. So nobody just, where's this $145,000? Who's liable for that
Councilman,
payment?
can you lean into the
I'm
mic?
sorry,
Yeah.
sorry. Who's liable for that $145,567 if it's on the books?
Yeah, so that's going to be the township's portion of the total OPEB liability because the town participates in the city's plan.
So they have to pay that, they owe that money to the city.
No, they do not owe that money to the city. That is a liability that is expected to be paid to future retirees or to retirees as they go. The big thing to remember here, and GASB 75 tried to clear this up, is there's a difference between reporting, financial reporting, and funding. So the funding, the plan is a pay-as-you-go. So the city's plan is you pay retiree benefits as they're incurred. You're not pre-funding based on the plan, the way the plan's written. So this is just saying, over all these future years, this is as of that date, what we think it's going to cost us all these future years from now, and that's present value to today, or the measurement date. So that's a financial reporting number, and then the funding number, the funding methodology would be you pay as you go. So instead of putting money in a trust and letting it build and paying benefits out of the trust, the plan is chosen to actually pay retiree benefits as they go to as claims come in, as premiums are due. So that's more of a financial reporting number that came out with GASB 75 and was previously GASB 45, which is why that's the only number in that column there. And it was brand new.
And that is because we're self-insured. Say we're paying as we go because we're self-insured?
You could be pay as you go regardless, but I would say pay as you go is very common for self-insured.
Thank you, sir.
Councilman Euler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to jump back to the leases and rental payments topic again. It says here in the documents that the annual cost of renting the office is $2,726. Is that accurate? How often is that reevaluated?
I don't know. It was like that when I got here.
That lease payment hasn't been revisited in a number of years.
So what would we estimate as a going rate for an office of that size in downtown Peoria? Because that seems like an awfully low figure to me.
I think some of the lease rates we've seen have been probably in the $11 to $14 range, depending on the nature of the space. Knowing the township space, it would probably be closer to the $11 space, but we could certainly then calculate based on the square footage what a market rate might look like for that, market lease might look like for that.
Thank you.
Okay. Councilman Kelly?
Just to continue that discussion, is it our practice to have a very friendly rate of rental? And if, I mean, I don't necessarily want to say that's good, bad, or indifferent, but I mean, the discrepancy between what is being paid and what a market rate would be is pretty big here.
It has definitely been our practice to have a favorable rate with the township, just as, you know, they're part of our health plan. We've had them on our health plan for a number of years, which should save them money in terms of costs that they might incur as being part of our plan. So I think that we've looked at that as ways that we could cooperate with another government here inside the city.
Okay. You're talking about health plan, but
What I'm talking about, it's the same thing. We're treating them and we're trying to look at them favorably as a fellow governmental entity. Who, I think it's a unique situation since they're a township. You serve all as the township board, so that's one of the reasons why we've treated them the way that we have.
Okay, thank you.
Well, clearly, Mr. Abnauer's only been in. He didn't negotiate this contract, and that's not what we meant at all. It was because the note was in there saying it hasn't been paid. So we're going. Not only has it not been paid, but it's only $2,800 a year, which is. I wouldn't have asked a question on that either if I was a tenant in that situation. But I think it's a fair question to ask. I think my last one, and I'm kind of looking for some maybe to tie the loose ends together for me, Mr. Abnauer, because we had gotten a letter from you earlier in the year where you were talking about some of the ways that the office may be able to become more efficient that you were recommending. And just when it came to the issue of post-employment, OPEB, the statement was, and I don't know if I need to read the whole thing, but basically it says, in the course of your research and in close consultation with our accountant, you discovered that Peoria Township has unnecessarily been contributing to the GASB fund, which estimates and is intended to cover post-employee benefits other than pensions. And that you've confirmed that Peoria Township has no such future liability because of the cash operating system that you work on, as opposed to an accrual basis, meaning that when a health cost comes up, you pay for it when it happens versus accrual. And then the final sentence was that this has resulted in a collective overpayment over the years of some $700,000. So I'm just trying to wrap my arms and help the council wrap their arms around, this whole OPEB situation. Does the township pay totally for your health care costs? Do we subsidize part of that? And is this $700,000 figure that you mentioned, is that accurate?
The $700,000 was a mistake on my part by about $100,000. If you look at the total contributions through the GATSB, if the auditing principles they're saying we don't owe this $145,000. So why were we paying all along? We've paid $429,000 in GATSB payments so far. If you were to take the $145,000, you'd be around $580,000. The $700,000 I took off a budgeted line, which was my fault. Okay. Totally on me. So it's about $120,000 difference. I made an error there. I sent everyone. I've tried to email, but I thought, well, we'll just bring that up because I knew it was going to get addressed. So I'm owning that, no problem. But I still feel that the money we paid so far was an unnecessary payment, and I think it was been explained right here. If we're not going to pay the $145,000, why were we billed the $429,000?
So, and it's probably not going to be resolved this evening, Mr. Manager, but I really do think that there's a lot of gray area out there between these two things, and really the township is part of us. I mean, we always work together. This isn't there's not and shouldn't be animosity between us, but we should both have an appreciation and an agreement on how these numbers come back to us. So and especially now that the audit's finished and we're in a position to be able to look at those numbers, Mr. Manager, I would like to encourage us to get the finance department and the treasurer's office and the township office together to try to reconcile all this, and then come back to us. If I don't know that we've ever even done this before, but almost an agreed upon. This is kind of the lay of the land. This is where we are right now, and for the new township folks that inherited an office with a lot of things happening, they're going to be on the same page as we are, and I think that's where we probably just all need to get to. Would you agree, disagree, Mr. Abnauer?
Absolutely. And,
okay.
And I'm sure my recommendations or some of my thinking about the future of the township, I may not have handled that properly. I'm new to politics, believe me. I'm used to running a restaurant, and I'm learning as I go, but I think I'm doing a really good job here. I have done a lot of things that I think were very good for the township, and I may have erred on this. I look at things. I was voted in this office to do the best I can for the clients and the taxpayers, and if I can find ways to save money, I'm going to bring it out here. I may have been a little overzealous on this one.
Okay. And I'm not. I just want everybody to be able to look at the figures and make the same assumptions at the end of the day. And so I'm glad that you're in agreement that we should sit down now that the audit's finished. We can sit down and look at this. We can all hopefully get to a point where especially where you numbers guys, you guys like that, and you guys can dive into it and have at it, and you can bring the report back to us. I think that's the best way to do it. I do think, though, and this is absolutely no reflection on the firm that does the audit, but a number of years ago on the city side, we actually had gone, I think we'd gone 10 years with the same auditors. And one of the questions that came before the council is it healthy to have the same auditors forever and ever and ever and ever? And some people around the horseshoe have experiences saying we've always had the same auditors, and other ones say, just to keep things clean and to make sure we got fresh eyes on it, it's something that should be rotated every, whatever the period is, 3 years, 5 years. So I don't have a recommendation for that, but I would like the manager to come back to us with one in terms of if that's a situation that we should consider going forward is just putting that out for bid and rotating that out. And again, no reflection at all on the current folks that we're using, just as a point of business. Mr. Treasurer, did you have something over there?
Yeah, one of the comments I wanted to make, though, regarding the GASB 45, including the 75, when you go back in time, there was some significant implicit discounts that were provided to our retirees, so that when you do an actuary, based on the type of plan you have, based on the benefit analysis, and based on the discounts, if you remember when we first started on the council, the retirees had the same costs as active, and there was significant discounts. And as a result, that creates liability. And, I think, too, there was the assumption that that there were no retirees on the city's health care plan, which is not a fact either, because we have a number of retirees who are on the township and who receive city health care benefits. And under IMRF, if you're an IMRF participant, you must provide health insurance. And so that's part of how this GASB requirement is done, because we look at the population of city employees, library employees, and township employees, and they're put together in a larger pool. And it becomes an obligation. It's an obligation that you budget in your funds every year as far as health care. And so, there's while the township reports on a cash basis, there's no such thing as a free ride in health care, because in the private sector, you would have profit margins, et cetera, that are built in, that we're trying to provide a benefit to the employees and so that we can retain and be able to be a good provider in the community.
Okay. I had Councilman Kelly and then, or I should say Trustee Kelly and then Trustee Graham.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't know if this is making things more complicated than they ought to be, Mr. Manager, but in your report back, could you also give us an opinion one way or another? We are the trustees of the township. We are the township board. And of course, there's a line between the city and the township, but I'm just wondering about a rental rate of $1 a year, or maybe no rental at all. It seems like anyhow. I don't want to get into that too much, and maybe it's a silly idea, but so if you could noodle that one and sure, do what you wish with it. Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Graham.
Treasurer Nick Dean, how is the auditing company normally selected?
we haven't changed the auditor collection in my 20-some years. So it would predate myself, and you were on the council then, so you would have to answer the question whether they were our auditors then. And I believe they were.
It just seems to me that it is a recommendation that the township officials make, not the city manager.
That is correct.
Not that I'm trying to take any responsibility away from you, Mr. Manager, as if you don't have enough, but just I think we should keep it framed appropriately that if we think, township officials think that it's time for a change, then the locus for change must come from the township officers.
No, that is true. I mean, that is under your purview. The city, after about 5 or 6 years, we usually go out on the city perspective because you put a different set of eyes on it, and it's just a good review, just like we go out for bids on other things. And so occasionally doing that just puts new, fresh of eyes on it, and it allows them to analyze it and see it from a different perspective. That is, again, no reflection on our current auditors. They've done a good job. I'm going to say it's been at least 20 plus years. It predates myself as well. So anyway.
And Mr. Abnauer, your comments tonight are extraordinary. Not only have you done a tremendous job trying to get things repositioned in the office and worked very, very hard for many, many hours, you actually telling the town trustees that maybe you were a little overzealous and miscalculated. I wish that we would all do that more often. I think you're doing a great job. I think the township, all the officials are doing a great job, and I'm proud to be the liaison to the township.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more lights. If there's no further discussion, we do have a motion and a second to receive and file. Please cast your ballots. And that motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk.
Just a word about the township audit. We did go out to bid 7 years ago, and yes, we have been with RSM for quite a long time. It used to be McGladrey, but 7 years ago they did respond to an RFP, and they cut their fees substantially, and that was why. And we also wanted to remain local, and so that's why we went with RSM again at that point. But it has been 7 years.
Thank you.
We are at the consent agenda. 19-266 is a request to approve the creation of a memorial for Dorothy Sinclair on the Peoria Riverfront at the foot of Morton Street to be called Sinclair Grove. 19-267 is a request to approve a sole source purchase from ERSI for ArcGIS GeoEvent server software in the amount of $31,500. 19-268 is a request to approve a 5-year agreement with the City of Chillicothe for dispatch services. 19-269 is a request from the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to approve a resolution amending the First Amendment to Consolidated Initial and Amended Restated Annexation Agreement for the extension of the acquisition contingency for property having an address of 9505 North Illinois Route 91 and North Orange Prairie Road. 19-211 is a request to concur with a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to adopt an ordinance amending Appendix A relating to manufactured building sales. 19-270 is a request to concur with a recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to adopt an ordinance rezoning property from a present Class R3 single-family residential district to a Class P1 parking district for the properties located at 1311 East Paris Avenue and 1315 East East Paris Avenue. 19-271 is a request to approve the site application for a Class H temporary outdoor liquor license from the Peoria Firefighters, Local 50, for an event to be held in the sidewalk area of the 100 block of State Street, the Evenside, and the 600 block of Southwest Commercial Street on Friday, August 30th, 2019. 19-272 are the appointments by Mayor Ardis to the Advisory Committee on Police and Community Relations with a request to concur of Reverend Tyson T. Parks III. 19-273 is an appointment by Mayor Ardis to the Peoria Area Convention and Visitors Bureau Board of Directors with a request to concur of Eugene Daniel. 19-274 is an appointment by Mayor Ardis to the Peoria Housing Authority with a request to concur of Kim Furness and William Perham. 19-275 is a communication from the city manager, the treasurer, and the finance director, comptroller, with a request to receive and file the month ended July 31st, 2019 unaudited financial report, and that concludes your consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Any items to be removed from consent this evening? Councilwoman Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Items 19-266 and 19-267, please.
Okay. 66 and 67. Councilmember Montalongo. Oh, got it. Okay. Any other items to remove from consent? Seeing none, we have a motion to approve the remaining items. Councilman Sear and seconded by Councilmember Ruckriegel. Please cast your ballots. The motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk.
19-266 is the memorial for Dorothy Sinclair on the riverfront.
Okay. Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Most of us probably don't know that Dorothy Sinclair was a 5-term female city councilwoman. So it is. I do plan to support this item, but I wanted to make sure that everybody understood that there were women on this council long before the women who are on this council are on this council, and they spent quite a long time serving our city. And so I am, ecstatic to be able to recognize Dorothy Sinclair in this way. Thank you. I will move for approval.
Okay. Councilmember Jensen.
I second that motion. As one of the 3 women on this council, Dorothy Sinclair certainly paved the way for us as being the first elected city councilwoman who served 5 terms. And as an unwavering supporter and advocate for the Riverfront Park, I'm pleased to support this and would ask a privilege of the floor to give to Fran Kepler just for about 2 minutes so she can explain the memorial and the proposal before us.
Okay, seeing no objections from the council, welcome, Fran.
Well, this is an unexpected honor for me. I didn't expect to talk, but I'm thrilled to finally do a memorial for Dorothy Sinclair. The trees are there. The Sinclair Grove has been there since 1991. A bunch of her friends got together. The only thing Dorothy wanted was trees on the riverfront. And so we had some flowering trees planted in a circle, and we started having committee meetings down there. We would have sack lunches and have our committee meetings for whatever thing we were working on with Dorothy. And we got to calling it Sinclair Grove, and it made a lot of sense. Well, Dorothy died, and then Henry died before I got my act together to do a memorial in her name. And so we would like to name that area of the Riverfront Park Sinclair Grove. The trees are already there. They're getting quite large. And it would be a very simple memorial, and it would be a large boulder that the river would not sweep away. It would be something that would be there with very little maintenance. So I ask for your help and support.
Thank you.
Thank you. I guess with that, I think a motion's been made, and I'll second that motion.
Yes. Councilmember Ali?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Artis. I'm also thrilled to support this motion. I remember Miss Dorothy Sinclair not just as a councilwoman, but also as a very, very active member of our community, a volunteer, a leader. I got to know her. I was very inspired by her. I admired her. And I just commend you, Fran Kepler, for stepping out to do something in her memory. I think this is beautiful, and I congratulate you on this, and I'm honored to support it. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no other additional lights here, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your ballots. The motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk.
19-267 is the request to approve a sole source purchase of ArcGIS GeoEvent server software.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I plan to support this item, but I had a couple of questions that I thought could be cleared up for me. The first question is the $31,500. Has that been budgeted for? Or is that coming out of some other fund? Okay. The second question is just really a simple explanation so people understand how sole source selections are made versus a selection by RFP.
This particular item is we already have the software or the server for ArcGIS. So this particular item that we're asking for will actually be the software that will run on this particular device. So in order for it to be compatible, that's why it's sole source.
So I just wanted to make sure that everybody understood, because when you see sole source, most people don't understand why that is sole source, and I knew that there was one was going to connect to the other, so thank you for that. With that, I'd move for approval.
Motion to approve, seconded by Councilman Regenbach. Additional discussion, Councilman Montalongo.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Our Emergency Communications Director, David Huddle, just have a couple questions for you, or more of asking you if you could just kind of explain what the software is going to do, kind of the vision for your department and how it's going to benefit Peoria.
Yeah, this software actually will run in conjunction with our computer-aided dispatch, which tracks our police cars, fire trucks, and EMS units. As far as AVL, it does police and fire. And what that does is it tracks the location of those units as they travel through the city. And this equipment will actually be able to receive that data and plot it on the map with a current map. Right now, the map we're using is several years old. So that's what this new software will do.
It sounds like, I'm very supportive of it. It sounds like a great piece of technology software that will significantly help. I guess, is there any additional equipment that will be needed to be purchased to make all this work?
There was a different agreement with the computer-aided dispatch vendor, which they've actually started that work. Once this installation of the software is complete, they'll complete that work under that original contract. There will be no additional forthcoming requests for this to be operational. And a plus for this it will also update the maps inside the police cars and the fire trucks, so the responders will have updated maps from the actual server.
Very good. As far as number of users of the software in different departments, could you mention those again?
I think we have somewhere around 30 to 40 units for the fire department, and we have about 75 or so for the Peoria Police Department. Plus, this will also work with the Peoria County Sheriff's Office and Chillicothe and Peoria Heights Police.
Excellent. No more questions. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Seeing no further lights, we have a motion and a second for approval. Please cast your ballots. Okay. That's, Councilman Grabe indicates that's an affirmative, so the motion passes unanimously. Madam Clerk.
We have a presentation. 19-276 is a request to receive and file a presentation by IDG Architects related to the MacArthur Corridor Plan, the South Village Implementation Plan, future plan for the Western Avenue Corridor, and development scenario for the Southern Gateway.
Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. You may recall some months ago, I brought before this council a request to authorize an RFP for an architect to come in with the primary purpose of looking at the MacArthur Street corridor and Wisconsin area. Those two areas are embodied in the South Village TIF. The presentation that is going to be made for you tonight in about 15 minutes, so we're going to be in and out, is of what I've asked them to focus on, and that's the MacArthur Street corridor and a housing plan connected to the MacArthur corridor. And the goal of focusing on that area, which is going to be presented tonight, is to try to leverage the $6 million bridge work that was done. As you know, we replaced the MacArthur Street Bridge, and there is a organization, a church on MacArthur as well, that is about to announce the groundbreaking of a $2 million addition. And trying to leverage what is going on right there right now, the primary purpose of this presentation is to present to you the MacArthur Corridor Plan. At a later date, because the contract with this architect does not end until the early part of October, you will be presented with additional information that provides a high-level overview of the other areas outside of the MacArthur corridor. And so this is just the MacArthur corridor and some parts inside the South Village TIF. With that, I will turn it over to the business manager, Aaron Gunn, and IDG architect employee, DeQualis Thompson.
Welcome.
Thank you so much, members of City Council, Mr. Mayor, City Manager Ulrich. Special thank you to Councilwoman Moore for allowing us to present to you today. As Councilwoman Moore mentioned, my name is Aaron Gunn. I'm the business manager for IDG Architects. And
my name is DeQualis Thompson. I'm the Director of Research and Development for IDG Architects.
Again, thank you for this opportunity, and thank you, community members, for your support throughout this project as well. We plan to present a brief synopsis of a detailed report and plan that we've developed for the South Village revitalization through the MacArthur Corridor Comprehensive Plan and also the South Village TIF Implementation Plan. We want to be very respectful of your time and other items that are on the agenda, so this is just a brief synopsis of what we've developed, but you do have a fully engaged or comprehensive report at your desk. Starting on June 10th of this year, working with Mr. Thompson and our CEO, Ben McMillan, IDG brought in 3 architectural interns from Prairie View A&M University. Those students lived in Peoria at ICC Student Housing through August 23rd to develop the report you have at your desk, the poster you see mounted in front of Mr. Mayor's desk, and the presentation that you will see today. The process used to develop architectural elements and implementation strategies of this report and plan is what we refer to as our approach. The approach sets the emphasis of the plan and underscores not only what should be done, but how it should be done. This is done so that the final product or deliverables provide a methodology and a route to success, achieving the end goals of a revitalization plan, and also achieving the necessary focus or attention needed in areas that are in detriment in Peoria. What does that mean? Our approach means that we focus on understanding the needs of community members, holding community meetings, engagement platforms, and interviewing individuals or key stakeholders in the community. It also means interpreting data that has already been gathered over the years. It also means researching development strategies that have been successful in other areas. Diving into an aspect of the approach is understanding what's needed, but also where the opportunities to meet those needs are. City-owned lots are an opportunity to meet needs, one opportunity. City-owned lots are in areas ripe for development, such as MacArthur Corridor. In MacArthur Corridor alone, there are over 57 vacant city-owned lots. Our approach defines the objectives of the work we did in creating this plan. Those objectives are creating a sense of place and safety for residents in the community, but also people who visit the community, creating an eco-friendly environment within the community, access to and expansion of economic opportunity for residents within the community, and celebration of the heritage and cultural significance of areas in need of revitalization in Peoria. The implementation strategy of creating growth sales.
Hi, everyone. How's it going? Great. Okay, so to create these growth cells, we've identified sub-districts within our defined scope. We have our commercial district, which flanks MacArthur Corridor. Within this district, we're looking to isolate specific needs to be met by the residences, to be met by the residents. So here we're basically looking to facilitate where people can grocery shop, take care of their daily needs and necessities. Along that block, flanking MacArthur Corridor, we have the mixed-use district, where we will have commercial engagement on the ground level and living on the second and third. Within that, we have our single-family homes. We've created this strategy because we want to create a border of commercial engagement around the South Village TIF area, with a kind of gradient from commercial development to residential development, not only facilitating the needs of those who live within the core, but also drawing those from outside of the core within the center of the neighborhood.
So creating those growth cells revolve around some key aspects. The first key aspect is community involvement. The community needs to stay engaged and participate in the revitalization process. Forming partnerships with entities such as OSF, the Peoria Civic Center, and making sure those partnerships remain intact throughout the phasing of revitalization. Recruitment of developers who have access to public funding and private funding to invest in some of these areas of need. Home ownership and phasing of construction. Our recommended timeline starts in 2020 and carries through 2025, given a 5-year focus to revitalization, followed by continued development and redevelopment of the South Village.
All right, so here we have a brief video kind of highlighting our major interventions to address the needs that we've identified within the community.
Bear with us with a moment. It may take a little while to load.
Probably about 5 more seconds. So we start at MacArthur Bridge. So on the sides of MacArthur Bridge, we're looking to create a mural that highlights the notable figures that come from the area. It's shown here. As you descend the bridge, the first intervention made visible is the I Heart South Village sign, setting the tone and creating a sense of place for the area. Further south, we've repurposed a city-owned parking lot to be the home of food trucks where local vendors can feed the neighborhood. We've redesigned the 4 bus stops within the proximity of MacArthur Corridor, including bulletin boards to facilitate community engagement. In the Health and Fitness Center, we have an urgent care clinic, a fitness studio, and a counseling center. Having an urgent care clinic within the neighborhood helps save costs from the patients and healthcare providers by minimizing emergency room visits. Within our Young Professionals District, we've created flexible situations that can accommodate a wide range of occupation strategies. Also within this district, we have our mixed-use developments offering commercial engagement on the first floor and residential living situations on the second and third. This particular prototype is designed specifically for small level retail and eateries. This mixed-use prototype is designed specifically to house professional office space on the ground level with loft-style residences on the second and third level. Next up, we have the Art Garden. So this is an open-air space for local artists to showcase their work to the public free of charge. And next up, we have our Arts and Culture Center, where we have an interior art gallery where local artists can exhibit and sell their work for profit. We also have a bookstore and a local museum that catalogs the historical significance of the area. Next, we have the South Village Plaza. So this is an engagement hub surrounded by dining and retail. This is a perfect space for block parties, events, things of that nature. Next, we have the Community Air Market, which not only provides fresh produce, but provides a low-cost solution for local small businesses to establish a location along MacArthur Corridor. Our workforce housing solutions are met by HUD and IDA guidelines to create affordable, high-quality living situations for the existing residents of South Village. South of that, we have our Workforce Training and Continuing Education Center. So we've identified construction as a means by which people can create long-term wealth as well as gain the skills to build their own communities. Across the street from that, we have our South End Banquet Hall. So this is a space to celebrate the achievements of those within the community, and the attached commercial kitchen will also support small local businesses that have food product. So I'm going to close with a direct quote from our report, which you all have on your desk. It is well known locally that the South Village neighborhood has the highest concentrations of minorities in the city. The challenges of systemic disenfranchisement, lack of resources and support is compounded amongst the minorities anchored in this area. To revitalize the area, residential and commercial development is not the end of the solution. There must be an effort to revitalize the population through education, skills training, business, and wellness support. The focus of resources and opportunity must be consistent, and the duration of that engagement must parallel the years of neglect and disinterest. It is imperative to note that improving the living and working conditions of residents living in the South Village area will not only benefit those specific people, but the city at large. And that concludes our presentation. We're open for questions.
Thank you. Thank you.
So I want to conclude the presentation by stating, if you noticed, a lot of what they presented, in my opinion, would be items that could be easily managed in a short period of time. I submit to you the bridge art that you saw. I can envision asking local artists to come out with different renderings that would go up on the bridge. That doesn't cost a lot of money. They talked about the art garden. We have more than a few vacant lots in the South Village area that could be repurposed into an art garden. We're talking about outdoor, we're talking about retaining and attracting residents. So DeQualis mentioned some of the housing designs you saw were to retain current residents. One of the things that the First District is suffering from is an exodus of people to other areas where they feel there is better housing. So we could bring that better housing back to the district. A lot of what you've seen regarding first level office and retail could not only be placed on MacArthur Highway, but also on Western. As you know, we're about to start a $12 million complete streets renovation of Western next year. And this could not fit nicely within that 2-year time frame. Yes, some other things are outside of that, and that's why they provided an implementation strategy. Some things will take a few years, other things even a few more years. One of the things that I kept hearing as the council person for this area, why there was no investment by major corporations, let's say, in the South Village, was that there was no plan, that there was no viable plan that showed renderings of housing that indicated where retail could go. One of the things that I will be speaking with some of our medical organizations in the next quarter is about an urgent care facility on the south side. In 61605, there does not exist an urgent care facility. And as a result, as most of you know, the emergency rooms become the first place of contact for a lot of folks who would go to an urgent care facility if it was in their community. So some of the names may change, some of the areas may move around. This is not engraved in stone, but this is a plan that has been vetted through the community. This was revealed in a much longer presentation at the Southside Community United for Change meeting first, and it was important for the community to see what they said that they wanted. These gentlemen, there were 3 others who've already gone home because they're students, who went to every neighborhood association, every commercial partner. I don't know if there was anybody in the South Side they did not touch to ask to fill in the blanks from all the other plans. Those of you who have been around this horseshoe for a number of years know we have plans on the shelf. The South Side community has been surveyed out the wazoo. And so the first thing they did were to take all of those plans and all the recommendations and put them on paper first, so that when they went back to the community, they were able to say, we respected what you said already, and we don't want to have you rehash that. But this is what we're showing you that you've already said. Now tell us what's missing. And when this presentation was made to the South Village TIF, at least one lady, I won't mention her name, Lavetta Ricca, started crying because she felt like somebody had finally heard what the residents were saying. And so, having said that, I will reiterate that you will receive information that touch on the Southern Gateway in a later presentation, because this contract is not over until early October. But I want to take this time to thank and recognize Kim Smith. Is Kim Smith here? Where's Kim? Kim Smith is a planner, and I'm surprised she has any hair left, because I promise you, she probably felt like she was pulling her hair out through this process. So I thank Kim for all that you did, all the work. Kim was on every place on the south side, these guys were, Kim was. And people in the community know Kim now. So I thank you for that. I want to thank, is Robin Grantham here? Robin Grantham. She is the representative excuse me, from PCCEO, and Robin was, and PCCEO was the fiscal agent who guided these gentlemen because they, Aaron has been in town 15 years, but the other guys had not. And so she helped direct them and guide them to organizations in the South Side that they needed to meet to present this presentation. And so having said that, there's a lot to do. We have a plan, and we have a budget session coming up, and I say that kind of half jokingly because, as I said already, a lot of this is going to take a small amount of money, but when we are in the process of doing our community revitalization plan for HUD, and HUD, as you know, provides us somewhere in the area of $2 million every year to be used through home funds and CPDG. And I will be presenting you with a report that has indicated, although we all agree that the South Side is desperate for new housing, that in the last 6 years, you would be probably not surprised to know that most of the money has not gone to the South Side. And I keep hearing, well, the South Side doesn't have a plan. That stops today. We have a plan. We have developers who have already stepped up to say, let's take a look at that in the form of PCCO and AFE Construction. I will be working with them over the next quarter to try to put together a funding plan for what is the low-hanging fruit, if you will. Because this is one plan that is not going to sit on the shelf because Lavetta won't let it, Robin won't let it, Helen King won't let it, and Babette won't let it. You know, any number of people on the South Side will not let this plan sit on the shelf. And with that, if you have any other questions, I have a motion. Well, this is actually a receive and file. So motion to receive and file.
Okay. Motion to receive and file, seconded by Dr. Ali. Additional discussion, Dr. Ali.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Artis. First, I want to thank Councilwoman Moore for taking the leadership in getting a plan for Southside revitalization. Congratulations. It's very exciting. I also want to thank city staff, Kim Smith, also PCCEO for serving as a sponsor for the project, and IDG for the work that you've done, and be sure and tell those interns, those 3 interns, that they did a great job. This is the second time that I've seen this presentation. There was a meeting at PCCEO, and it was a full house. It was standing room only. And this presentation was presented, and people were so excited. I mean, Councilwoman Moore talked about a lady crying. I witnessed that. But people were so excited because it gave hope to an area of our city that needs hope and opportunity and promise. MacArthur Highway, in my opinion, is the most promising street or thoroughfare on the south side that is ripe for transformation or revitalization because it's connected to the warehouse district, close proximity. It's right down the hill from Bradley University. I mean, it's just in the right place. It's not so deep in the south side, I think, that it can attract investors, and this project will definitely need to attract investors. I think tapping the Southside alumni for projects, for business projects and other projects is something that I want to recommend. And who are the Southside alumni? Southside alumni are people that grew up on Peoria's South Side. I'm one of those people. And it was a very mixed race, integrated community, and the people who grew up from the South Side live all over the city of Peoria. They live all over the United States of America, and some of them even live outside of the country. but they have fond memories from growing up on Peoria South Side, and I think that many of them would be interested in investing in, if they see a plan where they see opportunities, I think that they would be interested in giving back and investing in potentially a business project. Again, this will require private investment. I do see a lot of not-for-profit or non-taxing concepts or bodies up there, and I would like to see more taxable type of projects as well. But I love the idea of the food vendors, considering it is a food desert. I think that's a great attraction. But it's a concept, and everything won't play out identical to what's been displayed, but I think that it's been presented and put together with input from key stakeholders, leaders, and community residents of this area, and that's how it's supposed to be done. You know, ask the people what they need, ask the people what they want, and then begin to put that together. So I'm very excited. I'm also one that will not allow this to just sit on the shelf. I think this is an opportunity for us to lift up an area that needs to be lifted up. And I commend all your efforts. Very exciting. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Ruck Regal next.
Thank you, Mayor. Congratulations on a great proposal. There's really, where do you start? One of the things I think stands out is truly the aspect that you brought to with design. You've set a place with design that totally differentiates the work that's planned here. And I hope as we move into this, and I have no doubt that actually this will become, in some parts, forms, and fashions, a reality, that we come back to the design model that was so important in this plan, because it is a true differentiating piece that you put forward here. One of the other things that, having looked at a lot of plans, not just for the city of Peoria, but for other cities over the time, is it seems like the phasing a lot of times, if you miss one piece, it forms the rest of it not to be able to happen. What I like about what you've put here is these are components of a puzzle. And if we have a little bit of a delay on one part, we can move in another piece of this, and we can start to fill in the pieces as they become reality. And I think that helps a plan become to fruition much, much better than some of the plans that maybe that we've all seen or heard about that sit on the shelves. I know you've had a lot of community input, and I'd like for you to just touch a little bit more on that, because I think the number of surveys alone that Robin Grantham was able to bring forward is just one piece of that. But I think it's important for the community, for the full city, to understand that this plan was not devised around a table. It was not devised around 20 people. But of plans that we've done, this has probably had the most touch points in a very little time. And I know you had quite a bit of work in front of you for this. But if you can just touch a little bit on that, so I think that the full community understands those touch points.
Absolutely. Thank you. So one of the major objectives of our approach was engaging the community. So having access to engagement platforms that were hosted by PCCO, some were facilitated by Kim Smith and Ida. We arranged sessions that were totally interactive. So community members who attended those sessions not only sat around and listened to our ideas, but gave us feedback, input, and contributed to what you see as a final product today. Beyond that, we reached out to organizational leaders, community members, business owners, to meet them individually. We even went out and walked MacArthur as a group and stopped in at local businesses, barbershops, barbecue restaurants, used car lots, and just talked to them about what their vision was for their business, what their vision was for the area, and also understanding where their needs were and where their obstacles were in expanding. We also reached out to representatives from the Civic Center. We reached out to representatives from OSF, representatives from Peoria Public Schools just to get their input on what this plan consisted of and whether or not they would be interested in playing a role in the development of the areas that we're talking about. And everything that all the feedback that we got was overwhelmingly positive and more interest than I expected. There was, we had a meeting earlier today before this presentation with the NAACP and their representatives, and they are overwhelmingly engaged and happy to see something even being talked about, even being mentioned that this area will be focused on moving forward. So the community's happy, but for them, in my opinion, it's not a matter of if this is going to happen or really even how it's going to happen, but when it will happen. That's the response that I feel when I talk to people.
Thank you for that. And I think that it's also important to note, and I was thinking about this driving down MacArthur just recently, and I think I mentioned to Councilmember Moore that as I'm driving down in the two gardens that have now been planted, there was a flock of birds that were coming out of one of them as I was driving past. And I think that that is a great metaphor to what can happen to the South Village. And I love that term, and that is now my new vocabulary, because I think that if we say it, it will happen. And we take a project like this, and then we also put in line parallel the project along Western that's going to be happening. And all of a sudden, we've got two really good projects that can work together. Just again, congratulations on this. Thank you for all of your work on this. And I think that you've done this right by getting community input in the forefront and having that as part of the plan. I think you've built a successful piece for us to move forward on.
Okay. Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First, I just want to commend Councilwoman Moore for her leadership in making this happen. It's incredibly exciting. I'm very excited about it. Thanks the architects and Kimberly Smith and the rest of the staff for making this happen so quickly. I mean, I think they were just here in July when I was on vacation. I missed that first meeting that you were at. So this is incredible that this much work has been done in such a short time with all the community input. I was able to attend one of the first meetings that you had at the Frank Campbell Center with Ida. And it was great to see I know it's been, I don't want to keep repeating anything, but to see all the stakeholders there, all the citizens there, and to have their input in the development of this plan. I'm excited that this has all the things that I've been talking about for years. It's got the art garden, the art center, the mixed use part of the neighborhood, the incentives that are in there that are listed for nurses and teachers, like down payment assistance. These are all things that I've been advocating and talking about, and some of us all around the Horseshoe for a number of years. So it's great to see it happen. I'm fully supportive. If I can help in any way, let me know, and we're going to keep moving this forward. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I would like to add my thanks and congratulations to Councilwoman Moore for your efforts, and also to IDG, who came to town and made a big splash already. And we know that there's good things to come, and I know with our peers around the Horseshoe, when Councilwoman Moore says, I will be back at budget time, we will be expecting to see you back at budget time, and we look forward to all of this with providing as much help as we can for it. So with that said, thank you for the presentation. We have a motion to receive and file. I'm not seeing any more lights for comments, so please cast your ballots. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you. Madam Clerk.
We're at first readings. 19-277 is a request to receive and file a first reading of an ordinance amending Appendix A relating to outdoor storage and display.
Director Black, quick review.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a minor text amendment related to the ordinance change that the council has already approved for the sale of modular buildings or manufactured buildings. This simply says that for manufactured or modular buildings, where they are for sale, which I will remind you is only in industrial districts, that they do not need to be screened. In most cases, if items are left outside overnight on display, they're required to have a fence around them as screening. Obviously, if you put up a fence around something that is actively for sale and on a fixed location, it's difficult to sell that item. And so we would treat modular buildings the same way that we treat automobiles that are for sale outside, that they do not need to have a solid fence around them.
Okay. Questions for Director Black? Councilman Jensen?
Thank you. I think, did you mention, is this only allowed in certain districts right now?
Yes, ma'am. This is only allowed in the industrial districts.
Okay. And do we currently have any places where they have modular buildings for sale?
No, no.
That's all. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else, or a motion to receive and file? Councilmember Sear, motion to receive and file, seconded by Councilmember Riggenbach. Seeing no further discussion, please cast your ballots. That motion passes with 10 ayes and no nays. Madam Clerk.
Our first reading is a request to receive and file a first reading of an ordinance pertaining to Chapter 3 of the Code of the City of Peoria to allow movie theaters to sell alcohol. I'd like to call your attention to the yellow handout on your desk. The ordinance changes the classification from an O to an MT. And that is in the ordinance. So you would be adopting the yellow ordinance.
Okay. On first reading, Council Leist.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is a first reading to allow movie theaters to sell alcohol in the auditorium areas while viewing the movie. The city previously, back in, I think, 2008, had a theater inside Landmark that was actually separate from Landmark, but was called Innovation Theater. And they, pursuant to a 2008 council communication in action, had drinks served while viewing these movies that were in the Innovation Center. Subsequently, in 2012, the Riverfront Museum received a license, I-license, which is an assembly hall license, where certain members of the community can watch movies or presentations at the Riverfront Museum. What this does is it's tailored towards the movie theaters in general, hence the designation MT for movie theaters. The council, I believe, was approached some time ago, back in, I think, 2018, relative to this proposal. I think at that time it was AMC at Grand Prairie, where they were seeking this sort of situation. And in addition, we have received a request from the Willow Knolls Theater to allow theaters to sell alcohol. So it's important to note that no one under the age of 21 may serve or tender the alcohol. And I am also aware that there are representatives from both AMC as well as Willow Knolls here today. The question was posed as to whether the previous license, which was, I think, it was K at the Innovation Center inside Landmark could serve alcohol upon passage at a subsequent time. They could not. That use has lapsed, and so therefore they would have to seek an application under this MT license. That's about all I have on that.
Thank you. Questions, Councilmember Sear?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to move to defer the discussion until September 24th meeting so we can have a chance to do a little bit more research on this and read this last-minute sheet, yellow sheet. So motion to defer it until September 24th meeting, please.
I just want to ask before I take a second, because then we can't have any more discussion on it. Was there, in that time frame, will there be have opportunities to address the people that are here tonight, or would you like to hear from them and then defer the discussion? What would be your preference?
Well, I would like an opportunity to read the last-minute yellow sheets information there, and I can be in touch with these gentlemen and
okay.
have discussions.
I don't have a problem with that. Just being the first reading, it's all going to be informational anyway. Okay, so we have a motion to defer till September. Is there a second by Councilman Montalongo? Discussion on the deferral only. Councilmember Graham.
I certainly do favor a deferral, since this has been a moving target all day today as it relates to certainly the theater situation in District 2, the Landmark Theater. And also, I don't know, Manager, you and I had a little discussion this afternoon, if it was the intent of the administration to bring forth a positive recommendation that we do this, or if it's meant to be more clinical here.
This is not a positive recommendation or a negative recommendation. This is just an option that we have been approached, and the council was approached back in 2018. This is something that's clearly within the purview of the city council, and the administration will not be making a recommendation on this.
Well, that's good to hear, because as one looks at the original sheet as well as the yellow sheet, it would appear as if the industry is writing this. Says this industry continues to evolve, the move towards movie theater liquor licenses is a logical next step for the city of Peoria. It's not necessarily logical to me, so I would hope that we would have more restrained language, since it's not the intent, apparently, of the administration to make a recommendation. It's going to be a policy decision here on the part of the council. And I think the manager understands my position on this completely. So I do support the deferral for that reason, and I think we can approach it very objectively then. Okay. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. I had Councilman Regenbach next.
Mr. Mayor, I will not be supporting the deferral because I think we're going against the whole concept of why we established first readings for ordinance changes to begin with. I would like the opportunity to ask my questions so that staff knows what those concerns are before we go. So basically what we're doing is telling these businesses put their plans on hold for 30 days while we sit around. If we vote for this, if we would receive and file this tonight, we'd get those concerns out in the open and actually begin the discussion. So I think a deferral is extremely unbusiness friendly.
Okay. I had Councilmember Jensen next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I agree with Councilman Regenbach. That's why I don't see the reason for having a deferral on a first reading. That's the whole purpose of having a first reading, is for us to ask questions, gather more information, voice concerns, and give some direction to the staff. I think if we decide we need more information and some other issues come up, we can defer it at the second reading. So I'm not going to support the deferral, and I hope it fails so that we can have an opportunity to ask some questions tonight and get some more information. Thank you.
I have Councilman Kelly next.
I, too, agree with Councilman Regenbach and Councilwoman Jensen. We did get nobody's had a chance to read this, I understand, but it is first reading. And if we were going to defer it at all, I'd defer it to the next meeting. But I don't know that we need to defer it. It's first reading. So I will not be, as much as I like Councilman Sear, I will not be supporting his motion.
Corporation Counsel.
I will note, as the clerk indicated, the only change from the yellow sheet from the document that was set on the agenda is the designation of MT for movie theater as opposed to O. That's the only change in these two documents that was set out at the agenda.
Okay, thank you. I had Councilman Ruckriegel next.
I guess, actually, you just mentioned my my thought process on this. It didn't seem like there were many substantial changes to the yellow copy on this that, the defer would necessarily be warranted. And I think by deferring this and not at least discussing this, we don't have the opportunity for two people who are in the industry who've made it down to the council chambers to be able to speak to us. And I think that it would be important as we discuss this to have their input as well. I appreciate the timeliness of wanting to be able to make sure we study this correctly. I think, again, with the first reading, that will present itself before we get to the second reading, but I definitely would be in favor of moving on this tonight for the first reading portion of it.
Okay, Councilmember Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Having heard all the comments, I wondered if Councilman Sear wanted to withdraw his motion.
Okay, I am seeing one more light. Councilman Gribb.
The problem with this, counselors, is, first of all, the action requested comes embedded with a recommendation from the administration, even though the administration heartily states that no recommendation was meant to be provided. It comes in an unclean way tonight. Also, I've spent quite a few hours researching what happened at Landmark, and I think very few of you have the benefit of knowing how that played out and why it played out the way it did, because this is indeed from 30,000 feet. And I keep hearing this metaphor being used. This is just a first reading. Folks, when the first reading comes, it should basically be ready for prime time. It should have 98%, if not 100%, of the historic information we need in it so that we're not prejudiced as we take a look at it. There's always room for additional discussion and finding of facts and so on, but when we have such a mixed bag of problems here with this brought forward, I certainly support my colleague. He has one of the districts where two of these theaters are, and I have one of them. And the rest of you, I guess, well, district people, you don't have theaters, and probably you haven't received the degree of input that we have on this. I know Councilor Sear and I have been discussing for some time what we've been hearing from our constituents. Furthermore, in the recommendation, there is some comment about what the neighborhood concerns are, and it says none. Really? Neighborhood concerns? Well, what would that mean? So, I think we need to have more information on a first reading. I'm not business unfriendly. The folks that bring things forward like this in such a way as to make it very difficult to interpret this, even to my constituents, not to mention Denny Sears' constituents, they're the ones that are bringing it forward in such a flawed way that it's tainted. So, I really don't want to be lectured on how we're being business unfriendly. What's business unfriendly is the way this has been brought forward without full information for the policy-making body. Thank you.
Councilman Sear.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to thank Councilman Graham for obviously coming to my defense here, but obviously being called business unfriendly is very unfair. All I'm asking for is we get a yellow sheet of paper as we sit down in our chair without having a chance to read it. And as Councilman Graham said, there's 2 of these theater in my district. And I've received a lot of phone calls, and all I was asking for is a chance to talk with these gentlemen and to do a little bit more research. I don't find that business unfriendly at all. I think it's a good practice to ask a lot of questions before these types of things come in front of us. So thank you very much.
I'm seeing no further lights, so the issue that we'll be voting on is the deferral. We have a motion and a second. Please cast your ballots. The motion fails, 3 ayes and 8 noes. Voting yes, Councilmembers Sear, Grabe, and Montalongo. So the council will be discussing and questions on the first reading. So may I suggest with the representatives that we have from the organizations, perhaps we would allow the privilege of the floor for a couple minutes of whatever you'd like, and then if there's questions for the members as they speak, we'll do Q&A right afterwards. So we just need your name for the record, please.
My name is Rob Anderson. I'm an attorney for AMC Theaters. I have our local manager, Scott Oken, here as well. We're here to be able to address the council, answer any questions you might have. I would note for the council that the matter before you is the issue of creation of the new liquor license classification. In addition to, if the council so chooses to create this license class, you will still have control over any theaters that come in and begin serving alcohol at any of the locations, because any of those theaters will still have to apply for a new license at their locations. They'll have to meet all the qualifications, not only of the movie theater license, but the entire Peoria code regarding the service of liquor. At AMC Theaters, we take the service of alcohol very seriously. We understand that it is a privilege and not a right. We have over 24 theaters throughout the state of Illinois and several hundred throughout the country that serve this type of alcoholic beverages for our patrons. And we see it at our location not to be a bar, but as an added amenity for the patrons. The issue isn't that people are coming and they're just having drinks. It's when they decide whether they want to go to a theater or not, they want to look at all the options that they have. And one of those options is, can you get an alcoholic beverage there? And what we find is that the movie-going patrons would like that option, even if they aren't always going to take advantage of it, even if everyone in the party isn't going to take advantage of it. It's something that draws people to the location, and when decisions are made on where you want to see a film, if part of your group wants to get a drink, the entire group is going to go to a location that can occur. And where there are locations where we have theaters where that's not an option, we see sometimes that we're losing out on the full business of that. Where the alcohol isn't a majority of the business or a huge revenue producer, it's the added benefit and the full package of it. At AMC in particular, we have what we feel are extremely strong controls that make sure that the service of alcohol is done responsibly, that minors are not served, that people are not overserved. The movie theater business is not one where we want people in our auditoriums to be rowdy. When that happens, people get upset, they come up to us, they request refunds, and we are taking hits out of that because we have to pay Hollywood 60 cents on the dollar for every ticket sale we make, regardless of if that's an original purchase or a refund or anything like that. So it's in our best interests to make sure we are responsible in controlling the service of alcohol. All of our servers and staff are trained in Bassett, which is the state-recognized and required course for how to recognize overservice, service to minors, checking IDs, things of that nature. We have our own internal training programs as well, and we do secret shoppers. Obviously, because we aren't law enforcement, we can't send in people who are under 21, but we have a policy that we card everyone at AMC. If my 95-year-old grandmother comes in and I'm working the bar, I have to card her. If I don't, I am fired. If a secret shopper comes in and they find that someone did not follow our policies and card the person, these people are coming in who look close to 21 but are over, the employee is terminated. We take it extremely seriously. All of our beverages are served in special cups so that we can tell the difference between what is an alcoholic beverage and what is a non-alcoholic beverage. And we have standard recipes for all of our drinks, meaning you don't have a bartender who's using their best judgment and pouring a large amount of alcohol in a mixed drink. It's a standard drink every time, so we know exactly how much is being served to every patron. All of the patrons have to come out to the lobby to purchase their drinks at our theaters. This way we have the opportunity to observe them and see whether or not they appear to be impaired, whether they should be cut off according to responsible service principles. Additionally, as I'm sure you've all been to a movie theater pricing applies to our alcoholic beverages. That's an additional control that we have sort of put in place that prevents people from having too many beverages and becoming overserved. It is additionally a control that helps prevent service to minors, because minors aren't going to go to a place where they're going to be spending a large amount of money for a single drink. They're going to go where they get the biggest bang for their buck. We have found at all of our locations in Illinois that we have had no issues with the service of alcohol. I would be very happy to provide a list of the locations to your chief of police, and I would absolutely recommend he call all of them and see if they've had any issues, and we are 100% confident we will get a glowing report from all of them. And we're happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Anderson? Councilwoman Jensen?
Thank you. I have just a few questions. Thanks for being here tonight. I know you mentioned, but I missed, how many theaters do you have in Illinois?
AMC has 24 theaters in Illinois. We have several more that are going to be coming online in the near future.
And how many of those serve alcohol, or is?
24 theaters that serve alcohol.
Okay. And how many total do you have in Illinois?
I don't have that exact number on hand. I can get that to you, though.
Okay. And how long have they been permitting alcohol? Has it just been a year or two, or does it?
The first location in Illinois was in 2002, and I believe they had started before that outside of Illinois.
Do you know where that was?
Lombard.
Okay. And does AMC have theaters in other localities near Peoria? I believe you have one in Pekin. Is that right?
I believe we do, but I don't believe we have service at Pekin right now. Oh, I apologize. Champaign would be our closest location. We do have alcoholic beverage services in Champaign.
And you also have one in, do you also have one in Springfield?
In Springfield. The second one just recently was licensed this last month.
And they both serve alcohol?
Correct. We actually have 3 in Springfield. 2 of them serve alcohol.
And when you say you haven't had any issues with alcohol, can you explain what that means?
We've had no citations for sales to minor. We've had no additional calls for service. We've had no complaints from any of the municipalities in terms of improper service, anything like that.
And you've never had any violations or complaints with the Illinois Liquor Commission?
No.
Do the other municipalities where these theaters are located that allow alcohol to be served, are they in all different kinds of zoning districts? Do you know? Or are they?
We have theaters in many different towns and different areas. So we have some in the city of Chicago. We have some. We have one at Edwardsville. So we've got college campuses, big cities, mid-sized towns, a wide range of different locations.
Okay. Hang on. Let me check to see. I think you answered all my questions. Are there time restrictions on the sale of alcohol at your theaters?
Any restrictions would be set by local ordinance.
Right.
I believe in the copy that I received from Corporation Counsel, hours of sale would cease at 2 a.m. So AMC has an internal policy that sets our bar service sales based off of the legal sale hours. Our policy is we stop serving either at 12:30 a.m. or an hour before legal closing sales, whichever is earlier. The idea behind that is we want to make sure that well before the hours that alcohol are supposed to cease, that everyone is done with their drinks. Based on from 12:30 to 2 here would be the particular instance. If the ordinance in front of the council passes, there would be realistically no way that anyone would still have any alcohol by the end of the service hours.
I also have a question about your policy. You said that anyone who is purchasing alcohol has to come to the lobby
Correct.
To
That's where
purchase
the-
a drink, so you can't purchase 2 drinks and bring one to your spouse or your date, or?
Under our internal policies, we go by whatever the town does in terms of number of drinks. We have a limit of 2 per person per ID, if that's the case.
Okay.
But part of what we do in terms of training our bartenders and service staff is teach them to be on the lookout for people who are coming out multiple times for multiple drinks in short order. That's something that triggers a response from our team where a manager would be called and sent to the theater to determine, is this person purchasing too much? Are they purchasing to try and pass to a minor or something? Is it something that's concerning? And so we go in, we check, make sure that everything is going according to responsible service practices. Under state law, the two drinks per person is a approved method. There is no limit under the new, the most recent change in the state law from 2015.
Okay. Do all your theaters serve any kind of alcohol, or do some limit it just to beer and wine?
So we serve a full range of drinks. Depending on the size of the theater, the number of different options may be more limited, but we prefer to have the option to offer all our patrons the full range of drinks that we provide.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I had Councilmember Montalongo next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think Councilwoman did a very good job asking lots of questions here. I got most of my questions here. You mentioned about not over-serving. Was there a drink limit? I didn't catch that specifically. I heard.
So there is a drink limit in terms of, in a single transaction, only one person could purchase 2 drinks unless there is a limit by ordinance. We don't have a set drink limit, but what we found is that the majority of people who purchase an alcoholic beverages during the theater, we don't see a lot of repeat customers, and there's a couple reasons for that. Number one, people have spent a lot of money to go see a movie and a movie ticket, and if you have to get up and go get another drink, you're going to be missing part of the movie. So it's something we find where we don't see a lot of people. Unfortunately, I don't have the statistic directly in front of me, but I know it's 1.1, 1.2 drinks per person, I think, is the average that we see.
Mm-hmm.
We don't see a lot of people coming for multiple drinks, really because of the nature of the entertainment that they're seeing. I don't know about you, but I have problems even when I have to run and go to the bathroom in the middle of a movie. I don't want to miss any of it, so it's not something where I want to be going to get it, and we find that most patrons are similar.
One of my other questions as well, and although my kids are grown up, I used to like to be able to let them go to the movie with some friends alone, be able to drop them off and pick them up afterwards. So as far as somebody going to drink, is there like movies that you don't let them go into, like a Disney movie, or is that just all open? How do you handle that?
We don't segregate our theaters, and we find, like I said, because of all the controls we have in place, that it really isn't a problem. I know that is a common concern. I'm a parent as well. I have a 2-year-old at home. I don't take him to the movies yet because I'm courteous to my fellow moviegoers, but I can understand and respect that concern. But really, we don't see that being an issue because of all the other controls we have in place, where we really don't see people coming and getting overserved or any problems like that. And because of our training, if we see an issue coming, we try and make sure we take care of it immediately. So it's again, I would be more than happy to have you call any of the towns where we have locations and ask them if they've had concerns with those.
And as far as for some of the places that you have alcohol versus like soda, is this like a huge moneymaker for you revenue-wise? Do you have a percentage of what that is now?
Exact figure for you today, I apologize, and I can get one, but it's not a large amount. It's something on the order of, I think, 7%. It's not a large amount, but like I said, it's one of these issues where it's not the individual item itself, it's the whole package, where if we have people who want to come and get a drink and they can't get it, we're not just losing out on that 5%, we're losing out on 100% of the ticket sales, the popcorn, the food, and all those other things.
Gotcha. Okay, no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I had Councilmember Ali next.
Thank you, Mayor Artis, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here to answer questions. I have to be honest and say that I struggle with this because I always think of movie theaters as being very kid-friendly, very family-friendly environments, and many kids go to the theater without their parents or without some, adult guardian. First question is, do you track the demographics of who attends the movie theater? Can you give me the ratio of adults compared to the number of, or percent of children on average that attend the theaters?
I don't have those figures. That's something I could find out if we have. I'm not certain if we do, though.
Do you know whether it's a greater number of children versus adults?
I can tell you that in general, it's more adults these days than children. Part of the issue is that the adults are the ones with the expendable income. I know back in like the 90s, you'd see people would their kids would go to the theater and sort of park there for a whole day, and they would be mostly teenagers and things like that. We found mostly, and again, I apologize, I don't have the exact numbers, but the majority of the movie-going audience is over 21 these days. Those are the people who have the disposable income who are going out, and part of the reason we seek to add the amenity of alcoholic beverages is because we see that these people are looking for a more adult experience when they go out to the shows. One of our biggest competitors is Netflix and your couch. And so if people can have the opportunity to stay at home and have a drink and see a movie, we have to compete with that. And that's something that sort of we've seen in our research that shows that when we add these amenities, it brings adults back to the theaters more.
Well, and I know businesses do collect a lot of information, usually so that they can target their market. So I'm curious in terms of
information, and anything I can get, I
you
will.
do have that.
I said I'm happy to ask for that information from my contacts at the corporate.
That would be great. If you have any demographic information as it relates to adults versus children, how it breaks down maybe by age. If you have any information as it relates to race, even at your particular venues in Peoria, I'd be interested in that. And just a hypothetical situation, there's 4 young people that go to the theater, and one of them's 21, and the others are 17, 18, and 19. And the 21 buys alcohol, maybe 2 cups of alcohol, and then they go and sit in and they're watching a movie and they're drink sharing. How do you control that the underage youth are drinking, and then what are the consequences if the underage youth are caught drinking? Are they arrested? Are they kicked out? What are the consequences?
Certainly, I'm happy to address that. So, again, I can only speak to AMC's policies, but for AMC, as I mentioned, all our staff are trained, both the ones who are serving alcohol and the ones who are not. So everyone's trained to keep an eye out for alcoholic beverage use. We have those distinctive cups that I mentioned that show that alcoholic beverage is going on. So if a staff member sees someone who appears to be young carrying 2 beverages with a group of other people who appear to be young, that's something that sends up a red flag. If we see what appears to be drink sharing, those people are taken out of the auditorium and they are all carded. If any of them are under 21, the police are called. It is turned over to the local authorities. They can ticket or not as they see fit under your local ordinances. All drinks are confiscated. Tickets are not refunded. We take it very seriously, and we make sure that law enforcement is called, and we want to make sure that, like I said, a responsible server. One thing to note is that all the AMC locations are under the same licensee company. So if we have something that affects our license in one location, it affects our license not only in all Illinois locations, but throughout the country. So we take this extremely seriously, and we don't want to do anything to jeopardize our licenses throughout the country. So we have these very strict policies, procedures, and controls to make sure that we are not serving to minors and that we are taking that seriously and making sure that the appropriate authorities are involved.
So if that minor is arrested for underage drinking, I assume, then that is a misdemeanor, or what? I mean, what's the consequences there?
That
I mean,
would be
do you
based
know?
on local code, whether it was written up under the state law or the local. Under local, it would be an ordinance offense for the minors for underage drinking. For the, I believe there is an ordinance in the Peoria code for passing alcohol to a minor. Under state law, I believe it is a misdemeanor for passing and for underage drinking. But that would be something that would be deferred to your your police department, and then whatever prosecuting authority they handed the case over to.
Okay, thank you. I'd be very interested in the demographic information. Thank you.
Yeah, for you.
I had Councilmember Euler next.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Curious in similar size municipalities, like size theaters, how does this impact ticket sales, whether you do or don't have alcoholic beverages for sale, and what's the impact on a theater's survivability in a potentially challenging market?
So we do find that it does impact ticket sales, that it does increase ticket sales, and it draws more people in when we add these additional amenities to our theaters. One of the things that the theater business used to do is when a lease would be up, and if the theater wasn't doing well, the theater would just close. AMC is not interested in doing business that way, and what we look to do is we look to reinvigorate the theaters with these added amenities, things like that, to make sure that they are valuable properties that we can keep running going forward. Obviously, we believe this is a sound business decision and that it will increase ticket sales, that it will correspondingly increase sales tax revenue to the city. And everywhere that we've put these in, we have seen increases in people coming. Again, not just based off of the alcoholic beverage revenue, but off of everything as a whole, the additional ticket sales, the additional concession sales, things of that nature.
Thank you.
I had Councilmember Sear next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a couple questions. Some of the areas you're servicing right now, what is the breakdown? I mean, you're asking for a full liquor license, correct? All types of products?
Correct. So
what are your client asking for right now? They're asking what would be the breakdown between beer, wine, and hard liquor? Would you know that?
I don't have exact percentages in front of me, but I can see if we have those numbers and get them to you. I will say, in terms of our offerings, we have beer, wine, and then mixed drinks would be what it would be on our traditional menu. And I can find out what specifically would be put here.
Any of your clients that you're representing ever ask or start with a trial license, or is it all after it's I don't know, maybe it's a question for Mr. Lice. If this ever goes through, would it be forever? Can we do it for a year, a tryout, or trial basis, or?
Well, certainly we could amend by at the second reading or 30 days from now, whatever limitations you wanted to put on the license. If you wanted to do that, that's certainly subject to the will of the council.
We could like 1 year at a time just to
That's
see
a
what would happen.
possibility.
That's a possibility. Thank you. Thank you.
If I could just make one brief comment on that. Obviously, the council has to make the best decision for the city of Peoria. In terms of any sort of sunset provision on the license, it's generally our preference not to have that because of the investment that goes into building the bar area. And just to note, as I'm sure the council is aware, you still have control over the license. As part of any normal license in the city of Peoria, if there are violations, if there are concerns and problems, you would have the right to bring a citation against the client, against the license holder, and if the liquor commissioner felt it was appropriate based on the evidence presented, fine, suspend, or revoke that license.
Okay. I have Councilmember Riggenbach next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, gentlemen, for the thorough answers we're getting tonight. Obviously, there are a lot of questions from this body, so we appreciate your patience in answering them. Of the 24 AMC theaters in Illinois, you said you don't have the exact number of what percentage that is of the whole lineup of AMC theaters. Do you have any idea the trend in the industry, or half the theaters these days coming to municipalities for this, or do you have a rough idea?
I can tell you the trend is to move towards this as an option at all theaters, and that AMC is looking not just at Peoria, but at many other locations, both throughout the state of Illinois and throughout the country, to add this amenity to. Really, like I said, we're trying to attract the adult guests back to the theaters, and to do so, we find that adding these extra amenities is what's helping bring them back. We're seeing positive results at all of the locations that we have added this amenity in. And so it is something that is both AMC and from what we've seen other theaters, the trend is to add this amenity.
And I'm embarrassed to say, I'm not sure which theaters in Peoria are AMC theaters and which are in your...
We have the Grand Prairie Theater.
Okay. Your plan of operation, it sounds very impressive. I think part of the thing we'll want from our staff is to find out what the other operators do and if they have the same diligence in operations as you apparently do. You refer to the investment that the bar area takes. This will be a traditional concession stand, though, correct? There won't be a stand-up bar that people...
When I say bar, I apologize. That's sort of our term internally for what we call the MacGuffins area, which is the alcohol concessions, and that can take various different forms. At this particular location, it would be a separate segment of the concession stand where all the alcohol beverage service would take place only from that section of the stand. I believe, and I'm not certain if these were passed on to the council, but I did pass along to staff renderings of what we anticipate the area would look like at our particular theater. And we could make sure that you guys have that if you don't right now.
So there will not be a seating area where you can sit down before the movie and have a beer out in the lobby.
Correct.
You can only take it to your seat.
Correct. The idea would be you would go to the concession stand, purchase your beverage, and then take it with you into the theater and consume it while you enjoy the show.
And as a follow-up to your description, if I drop my kids off and they go in to get a soda and popcorn, they'll be in a different section of the concession stand than the 21-year-olds ordering their alcohol. Is that correct?
So it would be a different register where all the alcohol service would take place at. It's on, as you're looking at the concession stand, it's on the left-hand side. If you've been to the Grand Prairie Theater in the renderings, you can see it a little bit better than what I'm describing now. But then anyone else could just go to the other sides and purchase non-alcoholic beverage, food, candy, things of that nature.
Since we have you here, I'll just throw this out there. One concern that I'll bring to Corporation Council is the hours of operation. It's been a long time since I've gone to a midnight movie. Would you have, is that cutoff time that is described in our communication, is that critical for you, or would an earlier cutoff time be acceptable?
So the cutoff time that's described in your communication is the 2 a.m., I believe, and that would be
on weekends.
That would be correct. That would be the local time of ceasing sales. Under AMC policy, we would cease sales at 12:30. So we stop at 12:30 or an hour before legal closing, whichever's earlier. So for our purposes, that would be when we would stop sales, because our idea is, while we understand that there may be an interest in selling up to that point, we want to make sure people are done with their drinks well before the last show gets out. And additionally, as you mentioned about, it's been a while since you've been to a midnight show, we don't always have shows that run that late necessarily.
That was my next question.
So
Thank you.
it's a matter of we always are determining the closing time based on sort of partly the hour before and partly the last show that's going on there, because obviously if for whatever reason a show got out before 12:30, we're not going to stay open and just keep serving people drinks. That's not our business model.
Thank you very much.
Council Leist.
Councilmember Riggenbach, the hours of sale are listed in the first reading as one, you cannot sell alcoholic liquors at Class MT license between the hours of 1 and 6 a.m., and that's just our general time frame that's contained in our code. Of course, it could be modified.
I had Councilmember Ruck-Riegel next.
Mayor, I've got to confess before I ask some questions here that I'm actually in the theater business as well. So multi-screen, so I wear kind of many different hats, and so and this weekend I was actually at your theater, had a great experience, and nice job. One of the things that I did notice, and I think it's a trend in the industry, and maybe is some new seating, some new upgrades that you've done out there. And I think from what I'm hearing from from all of your answers here tonight is that really going to the theater is now an event. It's not sort of that drop the kids off sort of thing, and it becomes an event. And when I entered the business several decades ago, you bought chairs and they lasted you forever. Now you've got to invest in new chairs, new seatings, new pieces, because, and maybe you can touch on this a little bit, especially on the first run movies, which usually open at midnight, you don't make a lot of money on there. And so I think concessions, I'm assuming, when I'm looking at our P&L, when you're looking at your P&L, it really comes down to the concessions that you can sell, especially in those first weeks. Can you talk a little bit about the event piece on that, just briefly? Because from what I'm hearing you say, it's the veto vote that's weighing the discussions about where people go now, whether that be to the theater or maybe to another sort of event place. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be accurate. So as you mentioned, it is more of an experience now to go to the theaters, and so adding these additional amenities, offerings in terms of concessions is a key piece in drawing people in. You are correct, because of the way that ticket sales work, a large percentage, the majority of any ticket sale goes back to the studios in Hollywood. We don't keep that, so concessions is where we make the majority of our profits and losses. And so being able to offer the full range of options to all the people who want to go out to a movie or out for an evening is what can determine whether or not they're going to come to our theater, they're going to go to a different theater outside of town, or they're going to go to a restaurant. And we consider ourselves to be very, very family friendly, even when you're having the kids coming. And really, I mean, if you think about it, people take their children out to restaurants, and there's alcoholic service there as well. We are, we think, very similar in terms of it's an opportunity where the alcohol isn't going to overshadow anything, or it's not going to be the focus. It's just the one additional piece that adds to the experience.
Okay, and I don't have alcohol in my theater, so I guess question for this. From the plan here and from what I'm hearing, someone could not just go to the concession stand to buy alcohol. You'd have to buy a ticket, plan on attending
Correct.
a theater.
Correct. Only
show.
ticketed guests can purchase alcohol at our theaters.
Okay.
You have to have a ticket. You have to have gone past the ticket drop, and that's when you can purchase your beverage, and you can't leave with it. We're on premise only. We have no interest in being a to-go kind of operation.
And since you have some theaters with it, some without, and I know the fee here that is currently being looked is $22.50, which is not a small amount to be able to go into almost a side business of the concessions. Other cost of entry point, insurance, things that you're also having to pay to go into that?
So we would additionally have to maintain liquor liability insurance, both for the village and under state law. All the additional training for our employees, both the Bassett training and our internal training, additional staffing as needed to operate the MacGuffins area, since we need to make sure we have people who are 21 and up who are operating that, as opposed to like a 15 or 16, 17-year-old usher. That's additional in terms of making sure that those people are coming in, so it's additional wages being paid out, trainings, insurance, all things of that nature.
And pricing of product, I know if I go buy a soft drink across the counter at a theater, it's usually much more, and I hate to say it, there's a differential than what it could be outside of that at another venue. Alcohol pricing would be similarly raised, I guess?
Correct. It would be commensurate in terms of it's going to be more expensive to get a drink at our theater than it would somewhere else potentially.
All right, thank you.
I had Councilman Gray up next.
Thank you for coming to Peoria today, although I think it was very premature, and I'm sorry that you had to come without the atmospherics being correctly established. And I go to your theater a lot. I love your popcorn. I love your movies, and I like Landmark too. That's not the issue here. The issue before the City Council of Peoria is whether or not we are thinking this through, or are we shooting from the hip the night we were deciding what the fine should be for cannabis on the council floor? I remember that night. Completely and totally irresponsible. All of you have acquiesced in a first reading that has absolutely no input from your liquor commission or your Peoria Police Department. So you can be proud of yourselves. Now, I don't know how it's going to turn out, but I know that this process is wrong. The members of the Liquor Commission are not potted plants. They have a role in our government. That's why we appoint them at the mayor's recommendation. And our police department. Folks, come on. You have a first reading without one idea as to what their recommendation would be, nor do you have any knowledge of what happened at Landmark. I have some knowledge. I got that knowledge. First readings should come as first readings with about 98% of the information there, and historic information as well. You have violated every canon of how this body is to do this kind of work. And I'm very disappointed. And it reminds me not only the night we did the marijuana thing, but when we passed on Paint EC being our hauler and got twisted around because of premature action on that. You're asking a lot of questions here tonight that you should be asking your police department, and then having our wonderful representatives from AMC. We love them. I go to your movies all the time. I may go to your movie theater more than anybody here. So we're not anti-AMC, but this is a matter of how we're doing business in Peoria. In 18 years on this council, I've never seen anything more disgraceful than this first reading. And the manager knows how I feel about this. So I'm not talking behind anybody's back. First readings should come not from 30,000 feet up. They should have most everything nailed down so we can really make a mature decision. And I'm going to look, manager, for input from our police department next time, and our liquor commission should have been involved in this. And I'll leave it at that. But gentlemen, I'm not upset with you. I'm upset with our process. Because ultimately you have to do what you think is best for AMC, but I have to do, and hopefully, and I know the entire council will do what it thinks is best for the people of Peoria. But this process is just wrong tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Was there another representative from a different organization that wanted to address the council this evening?
I believe there may be someone else here.
Okay.
If no one else has any questions for AMC, I'm
Not
happy
not
to
yet.
see the
Not at this time. Don't leave yet.
Well, I will stick around.
Thank you. Just a name for the record, please.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Heath Thomas with Goodrich Quality Theaters. I oversee the Willow Knolls. I am not an attorney. I am actually a regional manager with Goodrich Quality Theaters. So, you know, I am licensed to serve alcohol because I work with the managers on the front lines to serve popcorn and give the best presentation to our guests that we can. We've also approached the city. This isn't our first liquor license as well. We have approximately 30 locations in our company. 15 locations serve alcohol in one fashion or another. We're located in Michigan, Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, and one location in Florida. Our Florida location has a full restaurant and full bar, as well as we do serve from the concession stand, and that location is bringing a microbrew or nano brew to brew our own beer online in Florida. So I understand the frustration of Mr. Grabe in the process. I've been through this before as well. So I apologize that it's been a bit wonky for you guys, but the questions that you've asked AMC, and I ultimately would expect you to ask me, we've been asked before. I've had at least 6 other councils ask me these same questions. There were some questions as far as ages. Approximately 14% of the Goodrich attendance is under the age of 12. So if you do the math there, we have 14% of our children's tickets sold throughout the course of a year. Screens in the United States, we've got actually 5,800 active movie theaters in the United States. This is coming from the National Association of Theater Owners. Approximately 1,083 of those locations hold a liquor license of some fashion. So that helps fill in a couple of the demographics that you guys were asking for. Something that we do a little different than AMC, we are a one drink, one ID company. So if you were to come with your significant other, I would need to see both of your IDs. That is our company policy. We find it to be more cumbersome, but it protects our interest and our guest interest as a company policy. We also shut down the bar sales based on the sales or the auspices that are put in place by the code. In this particular code, as I've read it, any open container has to be picked up within 30 minutes of the what I would call last call for the city. So we would make sure that we sell well before, so we would have everything out in order to collect any empty beer cans, beer glasses, because we don't serve cans or bottles. We also pour into a clear cup. But we would make sure that we picked everything up well in advance of the city code, where it states in this that we would have to have everything stowed by 30 minutes after last call. So that's my statement, and I'd be welcome to, or I'd be glad to take any other questions.
Okay. I'm seeing no lights, but we appreciate your attendance tonight, sir.
Glad to be in further discussion with this as well. And Mr. Least has my card, as well as Mr. Montalongo. So.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks,
Mr. Manager, I will ask that this item be run through the Liquor Commission before it does come back to us for the second reading. Councilman Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to mention two things to let the public know that we hear you. My phones are blowing up here. We do understand that the Riverfront Museum sells alcohol and has done so for 3 or 4 years. There may be some other considerations for other locations, but the other emails, I have literally gotten at least 4 or 5 texts to remind me that we sell alcohol at Chuck E. Cheese as well. Thank you.
Okay, I had Councilmember Ali next.
Did he say me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, thank you. I just have a question, and I get to say that I'm new to the council for probably about maybe 8 more months. But I have a process question, because one of the thoughts that came to my mind was, doesn't this first go to the zoning liquor commission? And Councilman Greb brought that up. So I have a question to the city manager, is why this did not go first to the liquor commission? What is the natural process?
There's no requirement that it go to the Liquor Commission. From time to time, we have taken matters to the Liquor Commission upon request of the Liquor Commissioner, who is the mayor, or a council member, but there was no request that this matter be taken before the Liquor Commission, nor is there a requirement that it be taken before the Liquor Commission. This matter was before the council back in 2018. There was a presentation made at that time by counsel for AMC. This is not a revolutionary mode of service at theaters. This has been going on throughout the state and the country for quite some time. So, but understanding that the council wishes to go to Liquor Commission, we can certainly bring it up to them, and we shall.
So it's not revolutionary for restaurants either, but usually restaurants, to get a liquor license, have to go through the process, right?
They still will. If we okay this type of a license, they'll still have to get approval.
It still goes through that process.
Correct. It'll still have to go through the signing process, but this is just The question is, this is a first reading, whether you wished for such a license to be had in the city of Peoria.
Okay, I see. Thank you.
Had Councilmember Riggenbach next.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of questions. As staff prepares to bring this back, I clearly want to see what other municipalities are doing. Is Springfield the closest city to us that does it? Is there what kind of competition, if you will? Beer, wine, hard liquor, or all those in all of the other locations? I'm also very intrigued by the one drink per ID concept. See how widespread that is in the industry? And then I just want to remind the council, and I remind myself that when we talk about family-friendly places, there's a lot of family-friendly places that serves alcohol now. The Civic Center, Dozer Park, and as Councilwoman Moore mentioned, Chuck E. Cheese of all places. So if we could also just get kind of a recap of how those places regulate the sale and distribution of alcohol, I think that would be helpful for us also. Thank you.
Councilwoman Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a few additional questions, too, for the staff. And I appreciate the information that Councilman Riggenbach asked for. Can you also let us know how many movie theaters we have in Peoria, and how many it's 3, and how many it could affect? Then it could affect all 3.
The movie theaters that we have would be AMC, the Goodrich theaters, and then Landmark. There is also the big screen theater at the Peoria Riverfront Museum. So so technically, I guess 4.
Okay, but the Riverfront Museum already has the liquor license, correct?
Correct.
And they've been serving alcohol at that movie theater since they've been opened, I believe, because I've purchased a beer there myself and watched a movie on several occasions. Okay. I just want to make sure it's clear, whatever we decide to do when this comes back, we can limit the hours of sale or change what you've proposed here. What you've proposed is for it to be up to a 2 a.m. license, is that right?
Yes, you can change it to whatever times you deem appropriate. Right now, we just incorporated the general time frame for the liquor code, but you can set for movie theaters at whatever time you deem appropriate.
So hopefully, if you give us that comparison of what other municipalities are doing, I'd like to know what the hours of sales are. If they have a separate area, I know some places that serve alcohol in movie theaters, some cities require them to be in a separate area that's roped off and separated from anybody that's under 21. So I'd like to know a comparison as to what all the other municipalities that allow it, that are similar to ours, what they require, if you could. And preferably we could get that back before we come to the second reading, so we can give you some more input on, unless you give us alternative ordinances. The other thing I'd like more information on, and maybe the city manager can answer this, on the additional tax revenue that we think this could generate, or maybe in a report back.
At this point in time, I think it's difficult for us to ascertain. I'll see if we can parse that out, but I think that we'll give it a swag.
And then I'm assuming, based on the other council members' input, we're going to get an analysis and report back from the police department and what they recommend and how other police departments handle enforcement and how we handle it at Chuck E. Cheese and other locations that currently have liquor licenses. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I'm seeing no additional lights at this time, so we'd be at a motion to receive and file the first reading. Councilwoman Jensen, seconded Councilmember Euler. Please cast your ballots. The motion passes with 10 ayes, no nays. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
We're at regular business. 19-279 is a request to approve a revised redevelopment agreement and parking deck lease with OSF Healthcare System and 124 Southwest Adams Property Holding, LLC.
Councilwoman Moore, did you want this, or is the manager going to kick it off, Mr. Manager?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What you have in front of you is the revised redevelopment agreement with OSF Healthcare. There were several changes that were made to the agreement. We clarified some language in the project description. The name of the LD building, which is the Caterpillar LD building, was changed to Administration Building. And we clarified that OSF cannot sublease any parking spaces in the Niagara or Jefferson deck that they may be leasing from us. So those were the changes to the redevelopment agreement. They're really housekeeping in nature. And this would be the version that OSF would then go forward with and execute.
Thank you. Councilmember Moore.
I'd like to move for approval.
Motion to approve, seconded Councilmember Riggenbach. Is there discussion on this item? I'm seeing none. Please cast your ballots. The motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Madam Clerk.
19-280 is a request to approve a purchase agreement for parking space at One Technology Plaza located at 222 Southwest Adams Street.
Mr. Manager.
Thank you. As part of the redevelopment agreement with OSF Healthcare, one of the requirements that we have is to complete the purchase of the Caterpillar portion of the One Technology Plaza deck. That includes 450 spaces. The Caterpillar, as part of the arrangement, when that deck was built and the building was built, they took over that portion of the deck. So this will allow the city to acquire the entire deck. Our purchase price is $2 million. That deck will then be, eventually as OSF opens up their mission headquarters, they will be leasing that in a triple net fashion for a 20-year period of time from us, which would cover the cost of the amount of this purchase. There's no money up front for us. Our first payment begins in 2020. We have 5 years of $400,000 payments that will be made by the city to Caterpillar. This will, again, as I said, allow us and afford us the opportunity to ensure that OSF has a place not only for their employees to park that are at their mission headquarters, but also that their employees at the LD building, as they move into that, the administration building, as they've now titled it as part of the redevelopment agreement, and as well taking care of those employees that are current or the tenants of the One Technology Plaza as well.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember Moore.
To move for approval, please.
We have a motion to approve, seconded by Councilmember Graeb. Discussion on this item, Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have one question about when we bond for the payment each.
No.
Go ahead. We're not going to.
No, we're not anticipating any bond payments for the purchase of this deck.
That's my question then. Thank you.
Councilmember Graeb.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe one of our former colleagues is present tonight, and if it would please the council, maybe he could approach the bench and make some comments about what is in the offing here for the city of Peoria and for our regional economy with the development of the headquarters downtown, the old Block and Cool building where I would go as a little boy to see Santa Claus, and it's going to look much the same when the Sisters of the Third Order are done, and I can hardly contain my enthusiasm. Good to have you here, Ryan Spain.
Seeing no objection from the council, Mr. Spain would be wearing his Vice President for Development for OSF hat this evening, and we appreciate you being here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Councilman Graeb. I noticed that you've moved your seat since last time I was here. I thought that The other seat that you're occupying was quite a great seat, but I'm glad to see Councilman Ruckriegel now located that, and you're taking Councilman Turner's very historic seat. I just want to thank the council, each and every one of you. You have been absolutely wonderful partners to work with on behalf of OSF Healthcare. And if you think back to the opportunity that we have now, not just to place 700 employees, OSF Mission Partners, in the headquarters building that's currently under development, and I'm sure every one of you gets questions all the time from constituents about what exactly is going down there. And can you look at the magnitude of the investment and transformation that's taking place in downtown Peoria? So 700 mission partners is very powerful. But again, one of the things that was so important to the sisters is that this project would not function as merely a one-off, a single-phase redevelopment, that it would be catalytic for other investment downtown. And so that is following suit with the work that you're doing tonight, with making the parking solution possible, with allowing the purchase of another Caterpillar building to be executed upon. And if this is approved by council, the closing on all of those activities would actually take place this week. So there is pent-up demand and urgency to get down to work for our community, to get more people into downtown Peoria. And so you think of 700 employees in one location, another 400 or 500 employees at another location, work taking place in the adjacent areas of downtown with Illinois Central College as a key partner with OSF in developing an innovation hub to develop startups and make sure that we're building a more diverse and inclusive economy throughout all of Peoria. These are exactly the type of catalytic activities that we were hoping for, that we would not just have one important and really monumental building redeveloped. The Shipper and Block building, the Block and Cool building, is the oldest steel structure building in downstate Illinois. This is an important legacy department store, an important iconic building for our downtown skyline. So it's not just about keeping that building intact and restoring it to vibrancy, but making sure that that project leads to the next project and the next project and the next project. And I think we're starting to see a real resurgence for what it means to be successful in downtown Peoria and our entire community, thanks to your leadership.
Thank you very much.
One thing, Sisters of the Third Order are very ambitious, and this is going to be the headquarters for how many hospitals?
So right now, that's a number that continues to grow. That number is 14 right now. That number will soon be 16. And again, if you look at what's taking place in healthcare, I think one of the most important things that OSF has done of many in the last 10 years is making sure that we now have an integrated healthcare delivery system with a corporate headquarters located here in Peoria. So as healthcare systems continue to grow, and I see no reason that changes anytime in the near future, Peoria is in a position to take even extra advantage of that growth that would take place in other areas of the state.
Thank you, Councilman. Thank you, Mr. Spain. We have a motion and a second on this, and I appreciate Councilman Greer putting special attention to this, because I don't think we can thank the sisters enough for their confidence in this community and for their focus on our downtown and how significant this is between the medical campuses, the College of Medicine, our commercial business district, and the warehouse district. This really is going to help tie all those together, significant investment on their part, and also a significant commitment to the city of Peoria, where they've been for a very long time, and I think this will ensure that they're here many, many more years. And just as a side note, as we all know, the LD building was not part of this original plan. That was a byproduct of when they were looking at the Black and Cool building, and they found out that this would really fit nicely there as well. So a total bonus for the city of Peoria. But thank you, and I know that Representative Spain will express those thanks to the sisters. And we have a motion and a second, and I would ask everyone to please cast their ballots. And that motion passes unanimously. Thank you, Madam Madam Clerk.
19-281 is a request to concur with the recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission and staff to approve a resolution amending an annexation agreement for property with an address of West Grange Hall Road.
Councilman Ruckriegel.
Thank you, Mayor. I move to approve.
We have a motion to approve, seconded by Councilmember Ali. Is there discussion on this item? Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I do have a question about whether, I guess it's for Director Black. Are there any other places in the city that we allow septic tanks?
Thank you, Councilwoman. There are locations in Peoria that are on septic system instead of public sewer. They're generally on the east side of Knoxville Avenue, on the bluff side. That just for purposes or because of reasons of topography, it's just simply impossible or would be incredibly expensive to get a public sewer halfway down the hill toward Mossville in order to service those locations.
Okay, what about up north where this location is? Is there anybody that recently, or I guess not recently, but annexed in?
The only locations, and I can't think of any right off the top of my head, but the only locations that we would have recently annexed that were on septic would have been locations that were on existing septic at the point of annexation.
Are there some then that still exist up north that are on septic?
I believe there are a few, but it would be a handful. I mean, probably less than half a dozen.
My understanding from reading this, when the owner petitioned to annex, they knew that they were going to have to change from septic to the city sewer lines, correct?
That is correct. That's part of our typical annexation agreement.
So my question is, why are we making this exception here?
So in this particular case, as the council will recall, this property was annexed back in 2017, and there was also a special use that was approved for outdoor recreation, including some go-kart areas, some miniature golf, and similar, what I would call seasonal outdoor activities. As the property owner worked toward actually constructing the development, what they realized is that they had a very small need in terms of a sanitary system. They simply have a couple of smaller restrooms and then a small concession building that would be hooked up to the plumbing system. So that was part one. Part two is that they are a good distance at this point from the closest public sewer line, and extending the public sewer line from where it currently is to their location would be prohibitively expensive for the type of development that they're doing. So in this, I would say, somewhat unique situation, we are asking that the council allow for an exception through this annexation amendment that would allow them, for the purpose of the development that they have proposed at this point, to initially operate on a septic system. The agreement, the amendment would say that as soon as public sewer becomes available on any of the adjacent parcels to their parcel, then they would have 12 months in which they would have to connect to the public sewer. So it's not an opportunity for them to, for now and always, be on a septic system. It's simply until the public sewer gets a little bit closer, or if their property use changes, then they would have to, just by necessity, hook up to the public sewer.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate it, that answer. So that language is in the agreement that they are required as soon as an adjacent property?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm seeing no, is there any additional discussion? I'm seeing no lights. Councilman Kelly.
I'm sorry, I can't find what I was looking for, Director Black, but isn't there an adjacent property that's also coming into the city that will require, or that either has or will require sanitary sewer? To the a little bit east and a little north?
I'm not aware of any pending annexations in that particular area. We have had a series of annexations in that area that if development were to occur, then we would go through the same process of determining the requirement for public sewer.
Okay. I'm sorry, I can't find what I was looking for, so.
Okay, seeing no lights, we have a motion and a second. Please cast your ballots. The motion passes with 9 ayes, 1 nay. Voting no, Councilmember Jensen. Madam Clerk.
We're at unfinished business.
Is there any unfinished business to come before the council this evening? Unfinished. Councilwoman Moore.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last council meeting, there was a discussion on an item that I was hoping to have deferred until I got additional information, and that was on the slurry seal. And at that time, what I was trying to convey was that the process that this particular item had undergone was not one that would withstand the light of day. And the next day I was able to request some information that proved it. If you recall, if I could remind you, I was asking for a deferral until this week of an agenda item that would support in fact, it was item 19-259. If I can be the city clerk for a moment, I will read what it says. Communication from the city manager and interim director of public works with a request to accept the low bid of R.A. Cullinan and Son, a division of United Contractors Midwest, and award a construction contract in the amount of $411,000.75 for the base bid plus 10% contingency for the seal coating contract for 2019. And the reason I had asked for that to be deferred was that there was no minority participation on the contract, and that had been waived. And in the communication, it indicated that the EEO officer had signed off on it, and several council members indicated that in their desire not to defer, that the EEO officer had signed off. Well, I had the information pulled the next day because we don't receive anything except the one-page council communication. And in fact, the EEO officer had not signed off. We received our communication packet on August the 7th. The minority participation waiver request had been signed on August the 9th. So 2 days after it came to us, the document was signed, and that suggests to me that the process was not followed the way the process should have been followed. So, excuse me, with that in mind, it reminded me after I discovered all this information that there was President Reagan once said, "Trust but verify." And so I find myself now in a position requesting all of these items to be verified by our EEO officer and signed off by that person, and if that person's out of town, someone that is designated to sign in his place. After communicating with the EEO officer so that there is nothing that comes through without at least him being aware of. He goes out of town for different things and vacations, so he can't always be around. But these things come to us well in advance of a week vacation or a week out of town for a conference. And that's what should have happened in this case, and it did not. And that concerns me. We have a process of confirming minority participation for a reason. And when we start stepping outside of that process, or, heavens forbid, the council is provided erroneous information, then we can't make the decisions that we are required to make unless we have good information. And as we've talked tonight, it has been mentioned that full information for this policy-making body is important, and that this process is wrong. Those were some comments made tonight about another issue. And I agree with that. And I agreed with it last week when it comes to minority participation. So having said that, I would like for any contracts that come through where there is some claim of minority participation, that those items go through our EEO officer, Dr. Ferris Mohammed, to make sure that we are verifying that those things are the case. We should be able to rely on the council communication that comes before us as we make our decisions, especially one that is in excess of $400,000, and we didn't allow that to happen. So you may notice that I didn't ask for this item to be reconsidered because it wasn't about this contractor. It was about the process. And we have enough concerns in our city around minorities, minority participation, minority employment, that when we start letting these things slide, then what's the point? So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you. Councilman Ruckriegel under unfinished business.
Thank you, Mayor. And this is for City Manager. And following up on a request was made by a fellow council member, I guess, several meetings ago. Following up on the fire EMS, public safety, demand analysis and deployment schedule, and then also secondarily the call center utilization analysis. Are we planning to discuss, or what are the next steps for the council, staff, and most importantly our community to be able to discuss this? And are there any barriers for you bringing this forward to the council or to additional outside members of the community that may have an interest in this as well?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The second phase of the Fitch study will be wrapped up here this week or early next week. We should have it in front of us, and then we'll distribute it out to all of you so that we can get it into your hands. And then the plan is to roll that into our budget discussions and deliberations. At a high level, the recommendations are going to focus in the second phase on the ET or the Emergency Communications Center, with some recommendations on how to staff that appropriately. All of the work that was recommended that was done in the first phase of the Fitch study was completed by AMT and the fire department and the project medical director, where they've gone through and they've recommended how they'll redeploy resources. This second piece will allow us to implement that fully, and that's making sure that we have the right staff in the dispatch center.
Will we be bringing that in front of council for a presentation on that?
In September.
Okay. And then I guess, is there any consideration on doing a similar study for our police department? Just with one officer in a vehicle, seeing if there's a need either from the chief or from you with recent studies on maybe a second officer in some vehicles. I guess, would it behoove the council?
That's a policy question.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else under unfinished business? Madam Clerk.
We would be at new business.
Any new business to come before the council tonight? New business, Councilman Regenbach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Last Monday, we held a public hearing regarding the East Bluff SSA that the council approved the beginning phases of. Quite a robust discussion, to say the least. We're going to have a follow-up meeting next Tuesday, the day after Labor Day. The East Village Grow Cell Advisory Committee meets at 6 p.m. So we plan to have the follow-up to the SSA meeting immediately following that. We're posting that as a 6:30 start time. If the EVGC meeting goes longer, obviously the start of the second meeting will be delayed slightly, but I just want all the folks that came to that meeting to know that we are posting responses to the questions that were raised and a summary of the discussion on the website that will be live tomorrow morning. And we will have some additional backup information that was asked for as well. As you look through the Q&A section, there are some questions that were more comments, so we simply replied to them so that they were acknowledged, but it just simply says, thank you for your comment. So I just want folks who are reading that to understand that there's no disrespect in that, but it was just felt that that wasn't formatted in the form of a question. Again, we will have a full discussion again next Tuesday about any of the specifics and how we move forward on that. And in fact, if you want to check tonight, it is on the website. If you go to peoriagov.org to the government link, then follow that to community development, to planning and zoning, to planning initiatives, and then to the SSA. I say that tongue-in-cheek because it's we will have a simple link on the site tomorrow, so don't stress about that, but just sometimes these web addresses get a little complicated. So I just want folks to know the discussion is far from over, and the East Bluff SSA will be discussed further next week. Thank you.
New business, Councilmember Jensen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to make sure the public is aware. We have a couple opportunities, and we're looking for public input on our budget. We have held 2 public meetings for the public to give input, but you can also go to a couple websites. You can go to www.peoriastrategicplan.com, and that's where the public can submit ideas, and then they become a campaign, and you can ask for other people to support your idea online and give feedback and input at that section. So, and you can have people share it with their social media pages and garner other public support for that idea. You can also submit your ideas about our budget directly through email to budget@peoriagov.org. And if you are unable to attend 2 of our public meetings, you can see a videotape of that meeting, that presentation, and the input that was provided at www.peoriagov.org/2020-budget-information. So please continue to give us input. We need your input to help us develop our budget. Thank you.
Councilmember Ali.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to acknowledge Councilwoman Moore. She was celebrated today up at Bradley and by the Turner Center for Entrepreneurship. They gave her the Small Business Advocate of the Year award. So congratulations to you.
Okay. Any more new business? Madam Clerk.
We're at citizens' opportunity to address the council.
Okay. We're at citizens to address. We have a 5-minute speaking limit, and we just need your name for the record, please. Up first is Marilyn Mosley.
My name is Marilyn Mosley. I currently reside at 709 West Spring Hollow Lane, 61605. My husband and I chose to move into 61605 when we built our home in 2013. I am not a native Peorian. However, I am hurt and disappointed by what seems to be a continued disconnect in funding and improvement in 61605. While I am excited to see the home improvements and renovations being achieved on the north end, I want to see the same improvements on the south side of Peoria. The renderings submitted by IDG have made my heart swell with pride. This is the first time I have seen a vision a real vision. This implies that someone sees the South Side as viable, valuable, important, and a place that can rise again. I have to wonder why it took an outside company to see the value of a part of the city that has been left to die. It is my belief it is because the plight of the South Side is not new to an African-American-led architectural firm. It is from the perspective of African Americans offering opportunity to help resurrect a community. To see successful, young minority men engage in such a project gives me hope that our young men and women in Peoria can realize that all things are possible to those who believe. I encourage the council to move forward with funding assistance for this initiative. Thank you.
Up next, we have Brian Evans.
Hi, my name is Brian Evans. Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I'm thankful that we live in a nation founded on the self-evident truths that all men are created equal, that all men are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. I'm one of the pastors at Providence Reformed Presbyterian Church. As a church, we have been called to serve and worship Jesus the Messiah, the risen and reigning King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Our body includes many citizens of this fair city. We are committed to Jesus' instructions to be in humble submission to his ordained civil magistrates. However, I am also called to remind those living under Jesus' rule and reign of their particular duties and obligations. As civil magistrates, you have been charged by the Lord God Almighty to preserve justice, to praise those who do good, and to be a terror to those who do evil. And we are all subject to our Creator's law, and we are subject to how he defines words like justice and words like good and evil. Do you remember your oath of office? You swore before God and man to the best of your abilities, you would uphold the laws of our land and protect the rights of those under your jurisdiction. But right now, in this city, on your watch, innocent humans, the most vulnerable among us, are being murdered by the abortion pill. God commands us not to murder. Our federal, our state, our local laws reflect God's view of this evil practice. I am pleading with you in the name of Jesus Christ. I am pleading with you, members of this council, to protect innocent life, to defend those who cannot defend themselves. I am asking you to declare Peoria a sanctuary city for all innocent human lives, both born and unborn. We can join the other cities in the United States that have already done so. You may be thinking, Roe versus Wade is the settled law of the land. But the very Constitution of the United States that you have sworn to uphold does not grant the right, nor the power, nor the duty to the Supreme Court to make law. They only give opinions. Remember, our Creator granted us this inalienable right to life. unless one has been lawfully convicted of committing a heinous crime, this right must not be denied. No one can lawfully deprive an innocent human of the right to life. The God-given right is the very foundation of civil society. The president can't take this away. The Supreme Court can't take this away. The federal legislators can't take this away. The governor of Illinois cannot take this away. I have watched you multiple times do your job. I tell you that I truly appreciate the difficulty of your role as a civil magistrate. Tonight was a good demonstration of all the different angles you have to consider. However, tonight, I call you to your sworn duty. I call you to protect life. Members of this council, God calls you to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly before Him. Thank you for your time.
Madam Clerk.
We have an executive session.
Mr. Leist.
Your Honor, we do. Pursuant to 2C11, we have an executive session for purposes of discussing pending litigation or anticipated litigation, as well as 2C21, which exempts discussions relative to previously closed minutes.
We have a motion to go into executive session by Councilmember Ruckriegel, seconded by Councilman Euler. Please cast your ballots. That motion passes unanimously. We have a motion to adjourn by Councilmember Moore, seconded by Councilmember Kelly. Please cast your ballots. And that motion passes unanimously. We'd like to thank H. Wayne Wilson and his listening audience at WCBU as well as Cable Channel 22. And this evening's meeting is adjourned.